So it's been almost 3 years since the pandemic and shutdown, and most of the major hospitality media have announced that, hey, the good times are back. But I'm not sure if that's necessarily been your experience. Are you cashing in on the restaurant boom, or do you sense that things aren't quite what they should be? Do you still need help finding the right staff? You know, they say revenue cures all ills, but if that's true, that doesn't necessarily mean that the problems have gone away, does it? Sometimes it just makes them hidden. And then when something happens, like pandemic and shutdown, all those systems come crashing down. And so to find out, we invited the founder and CEO of Electric Hospitality, Michael Lennox, from Atlanta to join Jim Taylor and me to take a sobering collective look into the hospitality industry mirror to see if there's anything that we could do to make this business better for everyone concerned. Welcome to another episode of Turning the Table. My name is Adam Lamb, and I'm here with my co-host, Jim Taylor. We're dedicated to bringing you solutions to the hospitality industry's most persistent challenges. In this episode, we'll discuss real-world examples of what's working in the hospitality industry and give you 3 actionable ideas to help restaurant owners, managers, chefs improve employee retention rates. And we'll get into all of that conversation right after these messages.
Welcome to Turning the Table, the most progressive weekly podcast for today's food and beverage industry, featuring staff-centric operating solutions for restaurants in the hashtag New Hospitality Culture. Join Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60 and Adam Lamb as they turn the tables on the prevailing operating assumptions of running a restaurant in favor of innovative solutions to our industry's most persistent challenges. Thanks for joining us. And now, on to the show.
This episode is made possible by eVocalize. eVocalize makes complex local digital marketing push-button easy for anyone. Empower your franchises with programs that automatically optimize performance and program spending across Google, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all from one easy-to-use collaborative marketing platform. To find out more, go to turningthetablepodcast.com/eVocalize. And we'd like to welcome Michael Lennox to the show.
Michael, how are you?
Doing great. Adam, Jim, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. And there's going to be a lot to unpack in this particular episode, and we're going to do our best to make it as the best 30 minutes that you're going to spend in your day, either today or any day. So, Michael, not only do you personally have an interesting story, but Electric Hospitality has been on a tear since COVID or previous to COVID. So I'm wondering if you can kind of give us a thumbnail sketch for anybody who's living under a rock and doesn't know anything about Electric Hospitality.
Sure. Yeah. So Electric Hospitality is our restaurant group that I started a while back here in Atlanta. We've got a number of one-off restaurant brands. Lady Bird is the first that we opened on the Atlanta Beltline East Side Trail in 2014. It's a kind of large outdoor-oriented, national park-inspired concept on the Beltline. And then a few years after that, we opened a place called Muchacho, about a mile south, also on the Beltline in Atlanta. It's a Southern California-inspired, also outdoor-oriented concept that is an all-day brand. So we have 3 day parts, morning, noon, night, and have coffee, breakfast, tacos, and then go into kind of a light lunch with toasts, sandwiches. We've got a Southern California surfer burrito, chips, salsa, the whole nine, and full bar. And that's a really fun brand that we're actually starting to grow. We've got two new locations we're working on. Then we've got a cocktail bar called Ranger Station above Lady Bird. And we also have an events and catering arm that we started last year called Electric Events. And we've got 2 pretty fun event spaces in town. We got a rooftop space on the west side called the Electric Room. And then we've got another venue that is just a few months old called East Side Swim and Social Club on the east side of town that is in an old car garage. It's got a big outdoor space and a swimming pool, and it's a super fun Electric Hospitality in a nutshell.
And you had to say goodbye to the Golden Eagle not too long ago, right?
Yeah, so we also had, good catch, I skipped over it. We opened Golden Eagle in 2017. It was a sort of Midwestern supper club that we really dressed up to the nines, won a bunch of awards for the interior design, had an amazing cocktail program, menu, the whole works. So I was super proud of the concept. It ran into some trouble during COVID. We closed all of our restaurants when COVID hit and regrouped for a few months. And once we reopened it really never got back up beyond 20-30% of pre-COVID revenues. So we made the tough call to close it in 2021. It was built in the same building as the original Muchacho location, which was much smaller at the time and only had daytime hours. So we ended up closing Golden Eagle, expanded Muchacho into the Golden Eagle space, and expanded the hours and really just built up the brand some more for Muchacho. And it's taken off like a bottle rocket since. So it was bittersweet, but it definitely was the right business move, all things considered.
Nice. Question for you about, so you said Lady Bird is national park inspired, and then all the spaces are fairly outdoor driven. Golden Eagle and Ranger Station, there's like a theme there of outdoor. Are you are you a big outdoors guy? I know this, that's not necessarily the top of the podcast, but it's kind of got me thinking about where all that sort of came from.
Yeah, I can't really explain it. And perhaps there's some deep subconscious forces at play I need to unpack in a or something. But yeah, I keep a long list of restaurant names and sort of ideas that come to me at random times, walking the dog, getting mail out of the mailbox, whatever. It's 100, names long at this point. And whenever I see a space that I'm like, oh, the light bulb turned on, I can totally see it. Like, it's got to be this thing. It kind of takes over my brain for a few months while I'm figuring out, the brand and the experience and all of that. And so I usually have a name that jumps off the page that I've already come up with. And then I start just building like a narrative around it and sort of an identity that to me makes a lot of sense, but builds sort of a persona and a character. And I just kind of imagine, hey, what would a person be that represents this brand? What are they into? What do they like? What do they listen to? Like just everything. And I suppose there's an outdoor bent.
Yeah.
Though if I'm being completely honest, I my wife and I have two young boys, 9 and 6, and between them and the restaurants, I'd love to have a parallel life where I'm, rock climbing or climbing Everest or whatever, but don't get out as much as I might otherwise.
Well, the interesting thing about that is it just clicked with me now too, that we were talking to you a couple of weeks ago, in advance of getting you on the show. And we were talking about how National Geographic named your restaurants so there's this, it's a really interesting connection there. And another outdoor space, Garden and Gun or something, also named you guys, give you some awards, right? So anyway, I just think that's really cool. Ranger Station and outdoor spaces and National Geographic has you on the radar. So that's cool.
It's interesting. It's interesting because here in Asheville and the surrounding neighborhoods like Black Mountain and Hendersonville, there's, I'm looking at the picture of Lady Bird on the website, and it reminds me of some of the places out here where there's outdoor dining. Very often there's a hog fencing so that people can bring their dogs and the dogs are interacting, which is, I don't know if it's better for the dogs or the owners. I'm not quite sure. But this idea of incorporating the outside with the inside, I think, is a very powerful thing. And so to get back to the topic of the show, which is there anything like, can the restaurant industry be changed for the better? Previous to going live, you were mentioning some of your backstory, of which, you spent some time as a lawyer, but always held this idea of that you wanted to get into the hospitality business. And so looking to you as being someone from outside the industry that came in and is now forced from within the industry. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sure most folks, it takes a while to find your calling or your path. And that's just the lucky ones that even find that at all, right?
Yep.
But yeah, growing up, I was told from an early age, my mom was a lawyer, my uncle was a lawyer, my grandparents and other folks in my family would always say, "Hey, you'd make a great lawyer one day." I have no idea what that means. I still haven't cracked the code on what that's all about, but
Right.
I had a pretty narrow view of what the range of options were as a kid. Hey, I thought you could grow up to be a pro athlete maybe, but then I ruled that out after I realized that was not going to happen. And then I thought, all right, you got to be a doctor or a lawyer or maybe like work in business, whatever that means. And so all the while I got really big into food and cooking, and the restaurant world became my sort of passion and fascination from an early age. Just my parents got divorced when I was 12, and that led to me needing to basically figure out how we're going to put food on the table for me and my brothers a lot of days. And that led to, coursing around in the kitchen and eventually getting decent at food. And one thing led to another. So, but it wasn't until I was maybe 25, 26 and had already been practicing law for a little while that it dawned on me that this is where I need to spend my time and energy. And it's not doing contracts and legal documents. It's because I was working with startups as a lawyer, and working with them, that was literally the first time that it dawned on me, hey, you could actually start your own business. Like being an entrepreneur is a path. And so immediately after getting into that role or position, I started brainstorming, hey, I don't like this at all. I'm not, at best, I could be a mediocre lawyer if I worked 80 hours a week for the rest of my life. I'd rather put that time and energy into doing something I'm passionate about. What am I passionate about? It's food, cooking, restaurants, and just like the hospitality experience. So started hatching plans. The Beltline in Atlanta was starting to become a thing. And it's since, I think, fundamentally changed the trajectory of the city in a really positive way. But I was obsessed with it. They just opened it. I walked it up and down first day. They cut the ribbon, walked past this space where Lady Bird is now. And it was a pretty banged up warehouse with an art gallery in it. And I'm using that term pretty charitably. There was like a 5-person red in-ground jacuzzi that you'd see in like a cheap Vegas motel in one of the rooms. And it was pretty jacked up. But in any event, I could see it plain as day. I was like, man, there's a big outdoor space. It's right in the Beltline. This is going to be huge. I've wanted to do an outdoor-oriented concept on the Beltline for a long time. Let me figure this out. Connected with the landlord. One thing led to another. Signed the lease, and 18 months later, we ended up opening it. So, and I haven't looked back ever since.
Wow, amazing! It's very cool that you're, and we can get into this a little bit. But I think it's very cool that you're able to see a space and right away be able to go, okay, here's what needs to happen here. Here's what I like, a really strong vision in advance, right? Because that's a big part of being able to put something together that people are going to enjoy and come to. And it's not just about how much foot traffic goes by.
Yeah, I can't really explain where that comes from, but I mean, that's definitely something that I've sort of took it for granted for a while. And then it took a while for me to put words to it that like, oh, this is more of a skill, and this is vision, and this is, there's a sort of creative aspect to it that, and not every space, it's not like I walk into any room and I'm like, wow, this could be put a circus tent in here and like, away you go. But when in the right place at the right time, I do have those light bulb moments where it's like, oh, wow, I can totally see it down to what the tables and the plates and the glassware just right then and there. And when that happens, I kind of listen to what the space tells me, because it's always just, it's going to tell you what to do if you listen close enough. And I think we've been really fortunate to stumble on all the spaces we have, honestly, are pretty like funky, unique, and have a patina on a character. And it's hard for me to imagine, nothing against it, but just like, we've been pitched a lot of new build, new construction, white box mixed use end cap kind of stuff. And it's like, hey, that's great. Maybe we'll do that one day. But my imagination has never gone hog wild just looking at like a gray square. So I don't know. It usually requires something with a personality, and then
more character.
We kind of take it from there.
So I'm thinking of the old trope of the frog in the beaker, in such that, you know, if you try to throw a frog in a beaker of hot water, he usually jumps out. But if the water's cold and you put the beaker over a burner and you just start raising the temperature slowly but surely, the frog will end up expiring because he never realizes the outside environment is changing. And I think to a certain extent, there's a lot of us in the restaurant industry that are the frogs in the beakers. Like, we think that things need to go back to the way that they were, because that's really when we felt like we could control things, or we were successful then. And then COVID comes and hits, and some of us have to rethink everything that we're doing. So I'm just curious, from your standpoint, Michael, when you first got into the industry, say pre-COVID, and you're looking around, did it seem like a healthy environment or a healthy industry?
You know, in some ways, it's almost like hard to remember back to what I even thought on a normal day, 7, 8, 9 years ago. But I think I've always had the predilection to, I think it comes from the same place as sort of the vision tendencies of really trying to look ahead and think about, hey, there's always opportunities. And I'm the kind of person who enjoys change and growth and all of this, but that not everybody is. And so, yeah, I think pre-COVID, to me, that it was always clear that a huge opportunity, and this was frankly one of the reasons that pulled me into the restaurant industry. I mean, I naively, perhaps at the time, thought that, I was like, man, I could do this. There's a lot of people out there that are not doing anything special, and I'm pretty confident I can figure this out. And I just had strong conviction that one of the foundational ways to do that is, if you are just genuine, real, and do everything you can, just bend over backwards to support your team and give them a chance to succeed, that people feel that. Like, there's no way to fake that. And I was a lousy manager, not in a malicious way, just like I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I first started. So I've grown quite a bit in that regard, but that has always been just a general North Star, is like, when in doubt, do right by your team, and that'll take you where you need to get to. But the blocking and tackling of, hey, what does that look like? And, it's everything from comp to benefits to training to the soft skills of listening and talent development and all this. And I think COVID has there was a lot of places just kind of taking their teams for granted, and, hey, as long as we're hitting our numbers, like, who cares? And you can just kind of do whatever you want, kick back and relax. And that's, to me, just very short-sighted, and the party will be over. And it's not fair to the people that are choosing to work with you. Like, they could work anywhere, and we're not investing in them. I mean, we're kind of missing the point. So yeah, COVID in a weird way has forced more internal reflection, I think, with a lot of organizations to really roll up their sleeves and refocus on the most important things, which is your team.
Well, interesting though, and we were talking about this prior to the call, or prior to the show. It's not just about your team. I mean, you guys did incredible things outside of your team, just to help support the industry through the pandemic and beyond, right? So, I mean, that to me is, I couldn't agree with you more about taking care of your team and protecting people and do right by them and all of that type of stuff that you're mentioning. But tell us a little bit more about what you guys did outside of the company, because that's stuff that you didn't have to do. Yeah.
So I'd say late February 2020, I bumped into a high school friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a long time, who had been living in Hong Kong for 10 years and had just flown back to Atlanta to bunker down with his family because it was getting out of control in China. And there was like, you know, a little bit on the news here and there, but I think people were brushing it off. And we had a long conversation, and he was telling me about what was happening in China. And he was like, look, I don't know anything about the restaurant industry, but you guys need to do something now because it's coming here and it's going to be bad. He was like, every place is closed. It's really not a good situation. And so that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I immediately started brainstorming like, hey, what the hell are we going to do? And so where my head immediately went was there were at the time about 350,000 hospitality workers that were in the metro Atlanta area. And 85% of that cohort are paycheck to paycheck. And so that certainly represents a subset of some of our hourly staff. But that's a shitload of people. I mean, that's a crazy amount of folks that, if they're out of work for any meaningful period of time, I mean, we're talking, you know, nobody's paying their bills, nobody's eating food. I mean, it's bad news. So I was like, hey, how can we help? Well, if we're closed, the only thing that we can really do is we have some infrastructure in the form of our kitchens. We've got talent in the form of our teams. We've got vendor relationships. If everything's closed, like everything, we can sort of recalibrate our model. And so instead of making food to serve our customers or our guests, we need to take food in, put it out the door just like we normally do, but we need to route it to folks that have lost their jobs. So that led to starting this nonprofit called ATL Family Meal. And we launched it March 16th when we closed our restaurants. Tons of restaurants all over the country closed it in 2020, and formed a 501c3. We got a board, worked closely with the Georgia Restaurant Association, ended up developing a tech-driven delivery platform and partnered with Lyft on that, the rideshare company.
Yeah.
And basically came up with this meal program where we would batch out a week's worth of meals for folks in our industry who had lost their jobs and their families, got their addresses, and then set up a mail delivery route where we had drivers come pick up the meals from us at our restaurants. They would take it to addresses all over the metro area. And we raised about $2.5 million to support ATL Family Meal and the meal framework. And then the restaurants that participated ended up getting reimbursed $5 a meal for each meal they produced.
Awesome.
So we ended up putting out about 250,000 meals from that part of 2020 on through the end of 2021, and worked with about 15 other restaurants and food businesses to feed a lot of folks that were in a tough spot in our industry. So really proud of that. And it definitely saved our teams and gave us a sense of purpose and kind of kept things afloat for us and a lot of other businesses that were involved.
So is it still existing now? Because even though some folks might be working, they still might be under the poverty line and need help from a day-to-day standpoint.
Yeah. So we ended up trying to pivot the ATL Family Meal work and the team in 2021 and shift it toward the end of the year, shifted away from the meal program because a lot of people were going back to work. And we were like, hey, we think there's a workforce development need here where there's a lot of people in our industry that are trying to get back into restaurants, but a lot of folks have just left the industry outright. And there's a lot of just festering issues that are left over from before COVID in terms of people not having the tools they need to succeed, being underpaid, et cetera, et cetera. So we were like, hey, we developed some programming that can upskill folks that are trying to get back into the industry. So take hourly talent, build them up into managers, and then place them into good organizations that that do good work with their people. And I think the vision for that program was spot on. We just ended up, it had some various things that didn't go in our favor as we were trying to pull it off. Worked with a few like different organizations. It was honestly a little more complicated than it probably needed to be. So it ended up not working, and that was hard to be like, hey, we're doing the right thing. We got the right idea, but this just isn't clicking for whatever reason. And so I ended up trying to recalibrate again. And after, 4 or 5 months, we kind of just ran out of steam, and it was like, hey, we've got a lot going on with our restaurants. We've done some really good work with the nonprofit. I'm super proud of it, but the time is just not now. So we've talked a lot about, and part of our long range vision for Electric Hospitality is to have like an in-house nonprofit or foundation that is meal oriented and hunger oriented. And it's something I'm definitely passionate about because, I mean, to your point, there were a lot of hungry folks in our industry before COVID.
Right.
And
100%.
there still are. And to me, there's a lot of unfinished business there. And it's going to take a pretty, far-reaching, holistic array of solutions to kind of get it to the right place where that's just in the rear view, but we're not there yet. So I definitely see some opportunities to do more in that general zone.
So it seems like
Incredible.
when you use the phrase looking in the mirror to see what could be done better, you've always had this focus on the team. And as you said, it doesn't happen overnight. But I just want to quickly kind of go over general compensation program for Electric Hospitality. And I just want to use that as an illustration of what that long-term vision can look like. And some of these things probably cost, more than your average, service bottom line, but some of these things are also accessible right now. So, you talk about compensation, back of the house starts at $15 an hour. Payday is every week on Friday. Ka-cha! Paid time off. All hourly employees are eligible for PTO after 60 days of employment, and you accrue 1 hour PTO for every 30 hours worked with an annual cap of 30 hours per PTO. So you're basically giving them 1 week of vacation paid per year, or they can use it however they want it, such PTO. Health insurance. Full-time employees are eligible for health insurance coverage the first of the month after 30 days of employment. We offer 3 different tiers of coverage through United Health. Electric Hospitality pays an equivalent of 60% of the lowest tier for single coverage. Employees are able to add immediate family members and will be responsible for the additional premium cost. 401k after 1 year of employment. Full-time employees are eligible to enroll in our 401k plan. You can elect to save up to 6% of your pre-tax wages, and Electric Hospitality will match 100% up to 4% and 50% up to 6%. Man, you guys, that's awesome.
Very cool.
Bonusly. Bonusly is a fun personal employee, and I love this one. Recognition
Bonusly's great.
program. Every month, the employees get an allowance to give bonuses to their colleagues to recognize their contributions. So if you're at the front of the house, you can tip a hat to the back of the house and vice versa. Save up your bonus earnings to redeem them from our extensive digital reward catalog featuring Amazon, Southwest Airlines, Bass Pro Shops, et cetera, et cetera. Rewards never expired. And the last one is Zayzoon, which allows employees to instantly access a portion of their earned wages on demand. It's a voluntary benefit that reduces financial stress related to cash shortfalls between paychecks and the fact that you're paying them every Friday. Again, these are very well thought out additions to what would normally be a package. And I can point to quite a few restaurant companies that don't do half of this or a third of it. It's like, here's your check. See you later. Don't bother me for another 2 weeks.
Well, what I think is interesting, Michael, is that, you've been in the restaurant industry long enough now, obviously, that you're one of us, right? You're a hospitality
I've been doing
guy.
this longer than anything else I've done in my entire life. So.
Exactly. But, listening to that list and from the conversations that we've had before, you're talking about looking in the mirror and doing things better. But I mean, in terms of how the industry in general, as far as I've experienced, goes, a lot of that stuff is like outside of the hospitality norm.
Right.
Let's do things the way that other industries do, which I love because, I spend a lot of time talking to operators about comp plans and stuff like that. And the conversation is usually the same as we've always done it, maybe tweak it a little bit. This is like, so much of this is totally different. So I mean, pat on the back. That's just very cool because, we can never get good enough at that kind of stuff, I don't think.
Well, and the fact of the matter is that, for the operators who are not thinking this largely, you get to be the beneficiary of their short-sightedness, because folks working over there, they look over the fence and seeing what you're offering. Like, like I said, I'm 3 hours away, man. I can be at work at 8 a.m. You ready?
Well, yeah, I mean, I appreciate you calling all that out. And just want to, this isn't tooting horns. It's just,
no, it just is
additional context. But the list you're reading off, most of that is calling out benefits and perks for hourly staff. Okay. And so, which is great. And like, we're super proud of that. The benefits are even stronger for salaried managers and salaried members of the team. So by that, I mean, we do 100% health insurance coverage for if you're salaried. We have the 401k, but the PTO, the PTO piece that you were talking about is for hourly staff. We've got a easier PTO program for salaried managers. We also offer a $1,500 annual continuing education stipend if you're salaried, and that's mandatory, by the way. So it's like, hey, you gotta use it. You gotta use it. So yeah, some of this also too is like we implemented the weekly payroll process probably 4 years before COVID. And a lot of this has like grown organically over the years. It wasn't just like, hey, oh shit, we got to do something because COVID just happened. What do you do? But at the end of the day, why are we doing this? There's definitely a cost associated to it, but it's not as high as you honestly think. And it's a lot of little stuff that I think in the aggregate adds up to significant value. And there's only the way to show people that you care. There's lots of ways to do it. Money just, unfortunately, is a way that you can express that, and benefits are as well. So I would definitely encourage any other operators to not view ours as like the holy grail, because we're always trying to make it better, but it's like, hey, this should be an annual, quarterly thing. Like, how can we take as good of care of our team as possible, and know that they're going to return the favor by sticking with you if you invest in them, which ultimately, to me, pencils out, because it does cost money to hire and replace people.
That's what I was going to say, is that, there's a bit of a cost associated to what you're doing, but the cost and the pain is probably far less than 150% turnover like other places. This is what the places in our industry face.
Our retention rate has been in free fall over the last couple of years, meaning like we are holding on to people for much longer than we ever have, and they're really
incredible,
bought in. And so that's exactly what we're shooting for, and we're really not letting off the gas. We've been investing into building out a learning management system, working with Wisetail, which has been a big undertaking. But yeah, it's like you got to have all the table stakes, comp and perks and benefits, but you've also got to invest into the skills and the sort of career development of your teams. And we're trying to be best in class. And the only way to do that is to really throw down the gauntlet and do what you got to do.
Well, and you say very clearly, we are actively working to be the best in hospitality. And in order to do that, we want to hire the best. And so it's not just as simple as just hiring the best and letting them do what their thing, but the fact that you're enticing them to continually learn, to have continuing training going on, to probably have great and timely reviews, to keep communication up. I mean, all those critical skills that the associates are telling us that's what they want, right? It's not some industry consultant saying, hey, you should really do this if you want to be best in class. Like, our people are telling us what they want, and whether or not we're listening is up to us.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I can agree with you more.
Well, and that totally aligns. I mean, one of our little taglines is that retention is the new cool. So that you guys are already speaking that too. So that's pretty cool.
It's like, why would you not want to retain people? Like, why? Like, what the hell? Who does not want to retain? It's a lot of work to hire people. Like, why?
Yeah.
Becomes the Amazon business principle, right? Amazon they actively, hire people for about 2 years, and then they, have a way of moving people out because, someone who's tenured has a tendency of wanting more and more, or so the theory goes, as opposed to someone who's coming in probably doesn't have enough security in their own right to be able to stand for themselves and say, hey, this is what I'm worth. And that's just me theorizing, but I do know that Amazon has kind of set that up in motion. So to me, it's incredibly exhausting to have to continually turn around and train people as opposed to having a solid group of folks. And yet, how do you, well, let me ask you this, Michael. So what do you do to kind of help forestall complacency amongst tenured staff?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a few things. One is that we've been growing quite a bit. We're working on a few new restaurant properties right now. And we're not huge. I mean, we're bigger than a one-off mom and pop, but we've got about 160, 170 staff across the org. So, I mean, I think growth is huge. It's just, if you're not growing, you're dying, in my opinion. And so having things to grow into and look toward is just a forced opportunity to say, hey, we've got a lot of things coming. We've got some big opportunities on the board. How are we going to get there? And that's created a lot of promote from within opportunities with us. So that's one. Two, our core values are creativity, connectivity, positive energy. And that anchors, virtually everything that we do. And we talk about it a lot. It flows into Bonusly, the staff recognition platform that we have. And it's just embedded in how we do things. And so how does that manifest itself? Creativity, connectivity, positive energy. That honestly is always something that we're trying to view through the lens of continuous improvement. Like,